Hey guys, what's up? This is FalseBulls123, and this is day 50 of our quarantine challenge. So, I'm little housekeeping right off the front. Um, I just got word from my boss yesterday. You might have noticed it if you're like watching these in order. I got a little bit of a text. That was from him. He let me know they're planning on opening up the 15th, and he'll let me know when he'll need me back there. So I'm like so fucking excited. I'm a little nervous because, what if, this is still going? But I've been reading in other places that, they haven't been having, new cases and, other places, stuff like that. So hopefully we can just be safe, still play it by ear, be okay. But I'll be glad to just be useful again. You also may notice I'm getting a little bit of a sunburn. Not sure if you can see that, but I'll turn around because my shoulders are a lot more redder. And that is because I've been actually working outside lately, so I've been getting a little bit of that burn on there. But I love tank tops, so what am I gonna do? Let's see. In other news, I'm also going to give you a little bit of a reading update. Ooh, fun. Daily vlogging, what's that? So I finished up, let's see, H.P. Lovecraft's The Dark Worlds of H.P. Lovecraft Part 2, which was this anthology series that they have on audiobook. It's okay. I'm not loving audio Lovecraft, if I'm being honest. Reading it, I can actually understand what they're saying, but it's just, he's a very thick and a very, dry writer. And so it's a little hard to actually comprehend that when you're listening to it. So if you're not paying close attention, the cyclopean pillars of crustacean goblins or whatever just flows through your brain, and it's like one ear out the other, and so I'm just like, what was I even listening to? I found that it I can understand it a lot better when I'm, I guess, doing yard work, when I'm clipping blackberries, just because that's much more, it's much less cerebral than a lot of other things. But if I'm washing dishes or something which requires a bit more concentration, I can't really listen to it and do stuff like that. And so that doesn't really work that much for me. I started another audiobook because I finished that last night. And in case anyone wonders, it was an anthology. It was Shadow over Innsmouth and Dagon, which is one of his earlier short stories, 1917 or something. Whatever. I moved on. I downloaded another sort of cooking memoir. This was My Life in France by Julia Child, and it had another writer on it whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but I might edit that in. I might just wait till the wrap up before we talk about it. And so that I'm actually really enjoying it so far. It's really fun. I can relate to a lot of Julia Child's experiences just because they sort of I relate to a lot of different things that happened when she was discovering her love for cooking and going to school for it. And I'm thinking oh yeah, I recognize some of my feelings about that because I'm a culinary student. I went to school for it, and I sort of had to get accustomed to that. I had a love for cooking, and so I can relate to discovering a love for food and a love for different cuisines. And I just really love her personality and her writing style because it really resonates with me. It has a lot of the fun of the sort of memoirs of day-to-day life, which I enjoy in travel logs, memoir styles. It also just has some really top-notch food writing. And I love it because I'm the only sad thing is that I'm listening to this on audiobook, so I can't stop it and look up things, and that really makes me sad because they'll mention, because I'll recognize a good amount of the terms used because I'm a culinary student and I know what beef bourguignon is. But it's they'll mention something else, and I'll hear tidbits, and I'll have a vague sense of what it's supposed to be, because I know a smattering of words in a bunch of different languages, but only when they're related to food. So if you're just yes, give me the apfeltaart, I know that's Dutch for apple pie, but you would ask me hey, what's this in some language, and I would have no idea. I can tell my oif from my jaban, but I can't tell my oui from my no. You know? Anyway. Also, I apologize for the entire country of France for how I butchered your language, but I mean, I feel like it was a long time coming. Anyway, guys, you probably didn't want to hear me rant with you about Julia Child and how much I love that fierce Quen. You're like, what did you click on this video for? Oh, yes, that's it. We're going to be looking at another one of my notebooks. And you're like, wow, Ryan, how many notebooks you have? Too fucking many, bitch. Too fucking many. And one of these days, when I actually get, like, a desk in here and I can actually, like, put them all on the shelf, I'm going to go through it. If you are interested in a little sneak peek, because I have more technically somewhere in this fucking mess I'm not going to show you, check out my binder box video from my moving story. And that's where I went through all of my boxes and binders and notebooks from when I was moving back to Medford. So that was all of my notebooks I had in Coos Bay. I have like a bunch of like old story notebooks and a bunch of like other random shit that just I don't even know anymore, like in my piles of stuff. So it's going to be an interesting experience going through that. Hopefully, like, scanning it or, like, reciting the interesting bits and then throwing away all those old notebooks because I don't need them anymore, It's like, I don't need 50 pounds of paper juvenilia to just be, like, clogging my pores, like, in this tiny-ass room, Well, guys, I'm going to shut the fuck up and let's actually get into reviewing my graphic notebook. Okay, guys. Here we go. Actually, this is my graphic notebook. And I'm sorry about that glare there. My, like, ceiling light is right above it. So, this is a Meet Cambridge graphic notebook. Don't know if that's special. But let's start looking through it. Let's see. This was a illustration made by one of the cashiers at my college. And I have a few of his illustrations. He used to like to doodle on some scrap paper and he'd hand them out. I love to collect pieces of paper, illustrations, all this sort of stuff from like all of my friends. Because I think that's like, a nice sort of like souvenir. Also, if they ever become like famous, I can be at like Antiques Roadshow. So next up is some D&D pieces of paper. And most of these, I believe, are the first... Yeah, this is my first D&D character. Why, Ryan, are you keeping this in your graphic notebook? I have no fucking idea. It had a pocket, And this was for, let's see, yeah, RJ Tardy. I don't know why I included two versions of this, but I did. I think I lost one of these one time, and so I rewrote it out from, like, my original version of it, because... Wow. Yeah, I literally, like, hand drew, like, my own character sheet when I first did my D&D characters, because I didn't, like, have a printer at home, and I really wanted to, like, make a D&D character. It'd be really fun to actually do some OC art for them. I've been thinking about doing that for some of my daily vlogs, but pretty much his entire character is that he's, like, fantasy Batman. His parents were murdered by this noble, and he's like, all he wants to do is like find out like why his parents were murdered and all this other bullshit, and it's the most edgiest shit ever, and I fucking love him. I actually wrote RJ into my original campaign, and so he's still like the same character, like he still has the same background and everything, but like one thing I actually really love is that he's just like this very angry bureaucrat now because I wanted like him to take like an arrow to the knee basically. So he has like, a bad leg, so he can't really adventure anymore. And I think that's like, it's an excuse. I definitely think that this should be like, I would love to have some like differently abled characters in my D&D campaign and stuff. But basically like, he broke his leg, like he's gonna sit down and rake in that money by being like a party manager, And I feel like that's very on brand for him. So next up here, I'm moving on because this isn't a D&D video. This is a notebook video. These are, let's see, UI sketches for a video game I wanted to actually make a long time ago. So when I was in high school, I came up with this concept for like this play. I know, it sounds weird, but like, hear me out. And the entire plot was that Circe's, like, that, like, thought on the island from Greek mythology, and I'm, like, super, like, maligning her, and I'm sorry, but, like, basically, like, she would just, like, sleep like tempt a bunch of men to like stay on the island, and then she would turn them into pigs, because men are pigs, those chauvinist fuckers. And so basically the plot was that Cersei somehow figured out time travel, came to the modern age, and started turning all the men literally into pigs because, like, you chauvinist pigs, like it was a really dumb, edgy pun. And so these people had to go back in time and find like the seven most independent women ever, like them fierce queens. And that was the entire plot. So like, you've got, and basically like, it just was so bizarre. It was like super uncanny. There was just like this weird like time travel like thing. And pretty much the only scene I ever wrote involved, let's see, not Madame Bonaparte. Who was it? I cannot remember her name off the top of my head. She was like this contemporary with Marie Antoinette, and she was like this basically like I'll put like the name up here like in the editing, but basically she was fighting Saint Nicholas for no reason. Like it was just for like no reason. I'm gonna move on from like that bit of the story. Like how does this tie into the game, right? Pretty much, I decided like scrap that. I'm not going to write a play. I'm not a playwright, and I'm not good at writing plays because I've never been in theater, so I have no idea of the craft. And I'm like, scratch that. Time travel, sort of like Capcom style, beat 'em up with like sprite graphics. And so pretty much like instead of like I just like the idea of like that those battle scenes, and it's like what if you pit historical figures against each other? And so that's basically what it would be. These are like the little fighting squares, the players, and then it would actually list. This is just a map of the world. Here's an actual view of some of the other like I guess like setting options, and I don't really remember what most of these mean anymore. Wow, actually, I just realized this is from some scrap paper from Harry and David. So I actually drew this. I realized not in high school. The play I was planning on running was from high school, but this was actually done in 2017 after I graduated, it seems like. So that dates it. Anyway, so I'd have been about 19 when I drew this. Anyway, guys, let's shut up about that. Pretty much, like, you could have all these, like, random, like, players fight each other, like, epic rap battle history style, but, like, with swords or whatever. And so it would basically be, like, a fighting game that used sprite-based graphics and historical figures. And I had, like, so many fun ideas for it. Like, I wanted to make, like, these co-op ones where you have these two players, and there'd be, like, all these, like, hidden, like, synergies and combos and stuff based off, like, historical jokes. Like, I could imagine if like somebody was like really like famously involved with, like alcohol, like, and then like fought a prohibitionist, there would like be bonuses and stuff, and it would, like be all factored in. And so like I had a bunch of ideas for it, but I never actually did anything with it, mostly because I'm not that. I don't know enough about game design to really make a game like that. I want to get back into it because I love the idea of it, but let's move on because I've been on this point for way too long. So next up, these were, let's see, flag sketches for the game itself. So I had like a bunch of different ones. Let's see, these are American, let's see, flag sketches from like different time periods. Then we had the Hinamari, the Japanese flag, 18th century Russian Empire, Communist Party, they're labeled so you can read them there. Let's see, this is some sort of just sketch page that I did. So, I could not figure out what this symbol was. It confused the fuck out of me, and I finally realized where I saw it. So this is a Norse rune. I don't remember which one, but the place where I saw it from was actually in Stardew Valley because it's used as a sort of cross for like their religion in the game, and so it was like in the back of my mind, and I couldn't figure out like where I saw it from. Then I have some random math. I have the phrase frequency analysis, some long division, a matrix, and then a quote from Jacksepticeye. There's a crack in those. Oh no, they are two separate things. Sean McLaughlin, A Pathful Experience, The Beginner's Guide. Next up is a Vignere cipher. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And I moved on to some decoding. I don't mention it, but I love cryptography. I think it's super fascinating. And so that's pretty much that. And I was doing these for, oh, what was it called? Ars Paradoxia. It's this just fantastic time travel sci-fi podcast that I never like really got that far into. It was really great because they had cryptography. They had little ciphers at the end of every single. Give me a second. Ciphers at the end of every single episode, and I love doing those. Like, is my shit. Here is some algebraic problems. Not really sure what for. Oh, I think I was helping my dad with Math 60, and so I was working through the problems with him, because that was something that both my parents had some issues with, was just the college algebra. And we had learned about that in, high school, so I had, a better grasp on it. Here is basically the idea that an equal sign is a balance between the two sides. That's pretty simple. And, yeah, this is just math, so that's kind of boring. Here is an interesting thing that's also math. This was a token frequency analysis of our local arcade. It's called the Family Fun Center in Central Point. And so what I did was that I actually wrote down how many tokens were required for every machine in the building, and then did a frequency analysis based on of how much tokens they took. And I think this math also has something to do with it, but I don't even remember anymore. So let's move on. Here's some more algebra. Apparently I did a lot of algebra at the beginning of this book. Okay. Here is some more frequency analysis. There was this game called Disco Zoo on mobile, and basically you had to search a grid to find these different shaped creatures, right? So one would be L-shaped, one would be all of this. And so I basically plotted out the probability of actually hitting one, in Battleship, of each one based off of the shape. And that was supposed to basically be a guide, a best idea player guide for how to find any of these characters. And wow, I'm a fucking nerd. Anyway, I had a few blank pages because I was going to do more of those, and we get into something actually really fun. I actually created a visual diagram to represent love triangles, love squares, things like that, for for just shipping. And so these are, except for these two right here, these should have really not been included in this section. But all of these are essentially all viable combinations, assuming the gender binary, of a love triangle, based off of sexuality and gender. This does not, so this only includes, I guess, whole male, female, binary. If I was to include, I guess, transgender, and I feel bad that's not trans-inclusive, I really do. At least it's not, non-binary inclusive, because it's the assumption that, yeah, well, there's obviously some problems with, inclusivity in it. The only issue with that is that if it was to be trans-inclusive, I essentially would need to include 6 other states. If I remember correctly. I worked it out one time. I believe it would have been 6 other states, but it might actually be more, to cover all possible, gender, sex permeations. And then it just gets a bit too complicated to actually write out. So it only includes 2 symbols here for male and female, though I would love to retool it someday to actually work it out. I think my original idea for this, when I was working on shipping charts, was to actually include 3 separate styles of shipping charts, to include, I guess, romantic, sexual, and gender, but I don't remember anymore because it's been too long. I'll show you just a few. I'm going to get a little bit off this in a second, but I'm going to show you a few examples. So here we see, so here's the legend up here to explain it. So this is, let's see, 2 males, 1 woman, 1 male, 2 women. They are all straight, and they don't, do anything because they don't have what's called the byline. The byline is my little tongue-in-cheek pun for essentially having an actual triangle where you have 3 points of contact. So here you can see, and these are separated by sexuality. So here are ones where they're straight, which are love angles, gay, where there's the first actual love triangles, and then a combination of 1, 2, or 3 bisexual members, all of which provide different, let's see, combinations. So if you want to pause and look at the different permeations of it, I'll let you go ahead. On this page, I put down all of the possible different versions of a non-reciprocal or non-full reciprocal love triangle. And basically what that means is that it is a partially or completely unrequited love triangle. So you have what is a completely uncompatible one where none of the characters like each other, and then you have other ones, which I will point out a few, which are pretty interesting. Double crush is someone has 2 love interests, but they don't necessarily know or reciprocate their feelings. Eve is, there's a couple, but then there's a third hanger-on that wants to get at one of them. Polycircular is basically A likes B, B likes C, so think Midsummer Night Dream. Shared crush is the opposite of double crush, and that basically means 2 guys like 1 chick. So what you would normally think as your standard, love triangle, but with the sense that she doesn't like either one of them. Side bitch, which maybe isn't the most PC, but whatever the fuck ever, is basically there's another woman involved. Someone is in a relationship or likes somebody else, but then they like another person. And so that's pretty self-explanatory by the arrows. Just look at the freaking arrows. Full circular is A likes B, B likes C, C likes A. Double crush circular is a combination of, the first one was oh my goodness, is it Peter or Gale? But then, Peter likes Gale, but not the other way around. For example. If you want to buy some shipfic of that, go the fuck ahead. Double Eve is basically the same as Eve, right? And if you don't understand why I named it Eve, let me explain. Alice and Bob are these 2 characters that are using cryptography analogies. Basically, Alice sends Bob's a message, but sometimes Eve, a third party, intercepts it. So that's where that's why I got the term from. Double Eve is basically Eve is stealing from both Alice and Bob and wants to get it in that menage a trois, but they ain't listening because they already got a thing and they don't want no throuple. And that basically explains it, fam. Reciprocal circular, and I really shouldn't have gone for all of these, but the fuck ever, is basically one person in a relationship, then it goes around, otherwise this one, and this basically is just the only reason, this is pretty much the closest you can get to being a full reciprocal, with just being slightly off. And you can see these 2 parties like each other, but one side of the branch only isn't returned. So basically, imagine some ladies having 2 dudes, and one dude kind of wants to give with the other dude, but the other dude's straight or something. That would be an example of that one. Here are more random, what looks to be fractals for some reason. I love geometric design, so I drew a lot of those. Here was let's see. And this is getting a bit more boring stuff, but we'll get onto it, This appears to be another frequency analysis. This of Gallagher is counting the enemies to see if they change between rounds. And they didn't, so I stopped counting. Another fractal. Love making those, like I said. Let's see. This was a map to some, pixel, space horror game that I played. I don't remember anymore. But this was just a map to help me, actually visualize the area. And this is where we get to some fun shit. Okay. This is a diagram flowchart of Seduce Me, the Otami by Michaela Law. And so I have not finished it, but I basically have counted out every single action up to... this was actually... I believe this was the first date for the characters. So I really want to start playing this again just so that I can actually get into finishing this thing. Because, oh my goodness, I've had so much fun making this. And you notice that I include, all of the artwork. I have, a bunch of other, diagrams to explain everything. And it gets a little complicated because, flowcharts. But I love making flowcharts of things. I guess a lot more blank pages here, which probably I was doing to actually save enough space for the thing. And
I don't remember what this is called, but this is basically a way of finding new primes. And if you're a math geek, do explain like the whole concept in the comments because I don't know how to. Let's see, moving on. Here is a mathematical proof where I was trying to prove that I guess these two sections right here were, I don't remember, like not congruent. It might have been congruent. Basically that they had the same like area. And I don't know why, but it was the funnest thing, you know. Looking over here, I'm trying to remember what this was for. This is a redrawing of that map diagram that I had shown you a few pages before. So this diagram right here is the same as this one right here. Took me a second, but this is from the same game, I'm pretty sure. I just redrew it because it was getting a little hard to read. Moving on, this is, I had this puzzle book, and so this was me trying to sketch out these things. They had a cipher puzzle in the first one that had it had 5 fucking shifts in it. And I'm just like, that is so me for like the first freaking puzzle. This was some line diagrams because it had to like do with like horses and tracks, and if you're a mathematician, you can probably understand the problem. And I'm looking to see what this is. Oh, I know. It's upside down. That's why I didn't recognize it. This was a diagram of, at least I'm pretty sure it is. Let me look. Oh, no. Sorry. Different diagram. This is a diagram of my old apartment. I have another one later in the book that actually makes sense. This is a map of my college drawn from memory, so it's not to scale. These are a bunch of random doodles, which kind of trashy now that I'm looking at them, but moving on. Okay, this horde looking thing is actually a flowchart of, give me a second, Bandersnatch. That like choose your own movie that like Black Mirror did. I did a complete flowchart of it. And here is another version of it. I'm missing a page of it somewhere. I don't know where it went. No, that's not it. Okay, then moving on, we get into genealogy notes. And this was before I got my genealogy notebook. So you can obviously see that it's a lot more messy. It's a lot more ugly than like, my actual genealogy notes. And so, yeah, just don't steal all my family information from that. These were notes that I took for a employee meeting when I worked at the CAF. Not that interesting. But this is. What the fuck is this, Ryan? That looks complicated and also hard. This is these are some decoded, cryptography things that I did from Fez. If you don't know, Fez is a puzzle platformer that has cryptograms as part of its second act, and it's so much fucking fun to play. So we're moving on. Here's some more, diagrams. Here's some more of me, decoding them. Here's some more of me decoding them. And we move on to some fun stuff. This was, a friend borrowed this page to, I think, organize her, what was it called? Animal Crossing, mobile game trailer or whatever, or house. And it's interesting. And this is actually some fun stuff. So, this is a partial family history and family chart of one of my D&D modules. And you're like, what, Ryan? A family... Sorry, my hand was in the frame. A D&D module has a family history? That's a bit Tolkien, bitch. But see, here's the thing. The entire module is essentially framed around this one family. And so, for me to really conceptualize them, I did the thing that would make the most sense, would be to frame it as a family history, because as, a sort of hobbyist genealogist, I have that ability. So, I'm actually going to read you the family history and tell me if you like it, okay? Comment down below, I guess. Okay, Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I remember rewriting this so that it actually made sense, but we will try to get into this with the best that we can do. Okay. Abram Kingfisher marries first wife Annabelle Sarasa, a neighboring noble's beautiful daughter. She bore him 2 sons. Her first child, Aurora, was stolen by the Fae. And basically Aurora comes back, and there's like a whole backstory that I have written now that I didn't have when I wrote this. And basically, so Annabelle Sarasa, she has 3 kids. Aurora, which gets kidnapped by the Fae, and then 2 sons, Abraxas and Rock. Annabelle is assaulted during highway robbery and contracts the milk sickness, which is kind of a vampirism. And then Abram Kingfisher has to kill his first wife, and it's super tragic, and it's just, yes. And I actually get into that in the story, which I... So this is kind of my first draft for this, just to let you know. During the Great War, Ophelia and Zanya were sent away to, the Kingfishers as their parents died in the war. Shiloh worked as a bounty hunter, securing Fae artifacts and criminals. On one of her trips, she met Abram. The mission burnt out her magic for a time, and she saved Abram. They adventured for years, and she bore him the 3 daughters, Salil, Luna, and Stella. Abram became a famous monster slayer and receives knighthood. Rock became a successful merchant and married a high elf woman named Sylvia. Abraxas took after his father and slayed a Nemean lion. He married a beautiful noble who he first saw in a painting. Dear Lord. Brock and Magdalene have a child, Elrod. So, this is very bare bones for the story, actually. And I'm actually glad that I have fleshed out a lot of parts of this story in my actual campaign, which I would love to talk to you sometime, but at the moment, I just don't want to get too far into it because it's still spoilers. But I think this would be a really fun point to come back to one of these days. Here is some sketches for Herringbone, and do with that what you will. And here's some more D&D shit. This is a basic timeline, which I actually scrapped the timeline idea, as if you've watched some of my earlier videos, you might know that I now have a world history, which I like to do it by the ages. That way I don't have to constantly figure out all this math bullshit. And I can just say, oh, it happened this, I can say it relatively, which saves me time lore-wise. This is a module diagram chart of all of my modules. That made sense, Ryan. That was something that said Wordsworth. And actually, if you give me one fat second, I'm going to see if I can find I actually redrew this in my bullet journal, so I'm looking for that right now. Okay. Yeah, so if we... here it is. Sorry, guys. So, as you can see right here, we have the module flowchart, which is a little bit more well done. And then we have sort of a rough sketch here. Basically, all of these modules will lead to one or the other. There'll be locks in place for various different things. So we can actually see them all together. And eventually they lead to different kingdoms for their own stories. So I'm going to move on and just go into some of the more interesting things in the back of the book. So this is near the end, as you can see. And I'm actually surprised that I filled so much of it, even though there are a lot of blank spaces. But I'm glad about, the uses I've had for it. This is a quest breakdown for another module. And this is actually a room-by-room breakdown of every single room in my other module, Charybdis. So you're like, oh my goodness, Ryan, that's so fucking complicated. How does this make sense to you? Short answer is, somehow. Easy answer is, here's a diagram. So basically, the idea is that it is and this is massive spoilers, so if you're playing D&D with me, stop watching this video. But anyway, this is massive spoilers, like I said. Pretty much, the idea is that it is a underwater sea habitat, and it's done in rings, right? So you have what's called bulwark hubs, which is the centralized ring of the, floor. And it's sort of the centralized main floor, and it has a bunch of locks in it. And so this is this ridge right here. Essentially, you have a bunch of spirit chambers, which are individualized, lab rooms. And then you have a centralized walkway that goes around through it. Each spirit chamber has an antechamber, which is a sort of just vestibule on the ring, and each one connects back to one of the hubs of the bulwark. And so pretty much all of this bullshit is just a list of every single individualized room in, like, the base. And this took me about a week to figure out, like, how this works. And it looks probably super complicated. But pretty much these are just every individualized place that they can be in the campaign. I want the module to be open world, and so I really needed to work out a suitable map for me that actually made sense in my mind. And so by actually enumerating every single room and connecting passageway, it worked out. And it seems really complicated, but it really makes sense as you play the game. Pretty much you'll start an elevator, you go around, and each, each room is done at a cardinal point, which that's what these symbols here are. I actually include cardinal directions for all of the antechambers so that I can keep them all in my head. So, that's my nerd shit. Let's move on. Let's see, this is looking to see... Okay. This is a sketched out map of this, darked out dungeon in... What game is it called? Hollow Knight. And apparently this is supposed to be an item that helps you get through it. But because I didn't have that item, I simply drew out an entire map of it in the dark so I could, make my way. This is a Minecraft diagram for a cow slaughtering machine because I wanted to harvest leather. I didn't actually make that, which sucks. Here are a few blank pages in case I ever need it. And here's some more bullshit. Let's see. This is another iteration of that quest line that I showed you earlier in the thing. And I was actually working backwards through the book, so that's why, you might be seeing some repetition. I'm looking to see what else we got. Oh, here is a list of all the personnel in the Tribidus model. These are a list of quest lines and the basic idea for a 24-hour cycle from the Force of the Kingfisher module. So these are two different modules right here. This side is Tribidus, this side is Kingfisher. This is a rough, sketch of the first act of the Force of the Kingfisher, which is basically its own little mini dungeon. You have, I think, 12 encounters. Each of them are completely different, and it leads up to the boss battle, and so I sort of, idealized it like that. Here is an even rougher sketch of that information I just showed you, and I'm going to get past it because it sucks, and I literally put all this information here, and look how terrible that is. That sucks. This is my first attempt at drawing out the map that I showed you earlier on, and so this is more, ideally visualized on what we're looking at. However, in the story, it's actually round and not right angles. This is just on graph paper, This was a first idea draft for a aquatic temple, which I ultimately scrapped, and just did it as a single puzzle. And we move on. Okay, this is a map from my first module, All Is He, and it's a bit faint. Sorry about that, guys. But essentially, this is the entrance to the prison area, the catacombs, and a Charnel house, however you pronounce it, where the cult processes the bodies. Little bit of a spoiler, sorry guys. I remember I was originally going to use these as a visual depiction of my battles, but I don't do, figurines or anything, so it's ultimately useless, so I scrapped that idea. And now we move on to a few maps, I believe. I think I'm missing one map, but I have scans of all of them, so it doesn't really matter. This is my map of my All I See module of the town of Deborah Springs. And if you've listened to one of my D&D Music Corner earlier in this vlog, you'll have actually heard the song that talks about Deborah Springs, which I think is kind of cool. So here you see all of the different buildings involved. Here we have the church, which I don't think I actually ever drew a map of the church, but it's okay, we don't need one. I announced it pretty easily. The hotel, the barracks, the residential area, the alchemist and arcanist, and then here is sort of this natural area with the iron mine, the sand waste, and the water station / mill. And this goes up to the Ashen Ruins, which sounds super edgy. Here is a really fucking bad version of the map that doesn't even look good. And then here is me, for some reason, writing out the first 41 characters in binary, octal, and hex a decimal, because apparently I need to do some nerd shit. Here's some more nerd shit for reasons I don't remember and can't explain. And at the very end of my book is actually a logic puzzle. I believe this is called Einstein's logic puzzle or something like that, or something like really. And it's basically trying to figure out like how these six men. Oh, I guess there's five of them. There's five men. They all have it is wall color, nationality, cigar, beverage, and animal. And you basically have to figure it out based on all of these different ones. And so here is a huge jumble of fucking doesn't make any sense. And I finally figured it all out correctly. And I felt like the baddest bitch. Because I was. Anyway, guys, that is my notebook. And let's kind of like, move out to the outro right now.
Enjoyed like another one of my notebook videos. I know these kind of drag on for a long time, but I mean, look at this chunk boy. Look at it. Like, we have to have time to actually talk about shit, you know? Hopefully that was enjoyable and not incredibly boring, but I know I just give the people what they want, you know? Anyway, guys, like I said, sometime around the 15th, we might be getting, like, out of the quarantine for me. So that's going to be the end of my daily vlogs. I'm probably going to take a week and two just to kind of, like, finish editing, finish uploading, because as of right now, I still think I'm about 20 vlogs away. And I'm just really waiting on, like, just trying to get it all, like, up there. I want to take a little bit of a hiatus, but then, like, jump back right into the swing of things. At the end of my quarantine, I am going to be doing a quarantine wrap-up. I know that sounds really fun. And I'm just going to talk about, like, all the books I read and, like, sort of my experience of really enjoying, like, experiencing both BookTube as a phenomenon and as something that, like, I really want to get into. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Hopefully you'll have fun with that. And then, like, let me know down in the comments, like, anything you've been excited to see, like, during the quarantine, any of my videos that you really liked, that type of stuff. That way I can help, like, grow my channel and all that type of thing. I'm really trying to find my niche and to find content that you guys enjoy. And I know that, like, growth will happen on its own. I just worry that, like, sometimes, that, like, it's all sort of a fruitless endeavor. But I'm trying my best, and I try not to let, like, that, like, bit of doubt on my social blade, like, growth predictions get me down. Anyway, guys, I don't really have any much more to say. I'm being really awkward in front of the camera, and I hate when I do that. So I'm just going to shut up now, I got things to do this afternoon. I got a bunch of videos to edit, because, oh my goodness, daily vlogs. And yeah, like, I'm just going to get stuff to do. So I'll see you guys later, I'll see you tomorrow, like I always do. And until then, I just want you to be safe, wash your hands, do all that bullshit, like, stay home. Like, don't be like those crazy people in, like, Georgia or whatever that are just, like, intimidating governors and protesting outside the mall and getting everyone infected. Because that's some dumb shit. And don't be a dumb bitch doing dumb shit, Anyway, guys. False Bulls, 1, 2, 3. I'm signing out.